Hey everyone, and welcome. As future physician assistants, you're learning all about how to gather facts, analyze data, and make some pretty huge, life-changing decisions. But what if I told you there's this invisible force, a sort of hidden architect, that can shape those decisions without you even realizing it? Well, today, we're pulling back the curtain on something called cognitive bias. So let's just jump right in. When we talk about patient safety, our minds usually go to things like medical knowledge or system failures. But what if one of the biggest risks is actually hardwired into the way all of our brains work? What do you think is a major contributor to the kinds of diagnostic errors that can lead to preventable harm? Well, the answer, in a shocking number of cases, is cognitive bias. Research has shown that up to a staggering 75% of diagnostic errors in internal medicine can be traced right back to these predictable glitches in our thinking. Let that sink in. That's 3 out of 4. So this isn't some minor issue. It's absolutely central to providing safe and effective care. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll start with the diagnostic dilemma itself. Then we'll explore our brain's mental shortcuts, the why behind all this. After that, we'll look at a rogues gallery of common biases you're going to see out in the field. We'll also see how this stuff can even corrupt medical research. And finally, we'll arm you with some real strategies for, thinking about your thinking. First up, the diagnostic dilemma. This is all about changing how we think about medical errors. It's about shifting from asking, what piece of information didn't I know, to asking the much harder question, how did my own thinking lead me down the wrong path? And this is the part that's so important, so listen up. You can have all the clinical knowledge in the world, like you could be a walking textbook, and still make a mistake. Why? Because so many diagnostic errors don't come from a knowledge gap. They come from faulty reasoning, from these predictable, systematic patterns that affect everyone, even the most seasoned experts. These aren't personal failings. It's just how our brains are wired. So if the problem isn't a lack of knowledge, then what is it? Well, to really get why our reasoning can go off the rails, we need to look at how the brain is built to work in the first place. See, it's designed for efficiency, and that efficiency comes from taking, mental shortcuts. These shortcuts have a name, heuristics. Think of them as your brain's rules of thumb, or its autopilot mode. They're essential. Without them, we'd be totally paralyzed by every single decision. But here's the catch. While they help us act fast, they are the very things that swing open the door for cognitive biases to sneak in. And quick but important distinction here. A cognitive bias is not the same thing as a logical fallacy. A fallacy is a flaw in the structure of your argument, like a math equation that's just set up wrong from the start. A cognitive bias, though, is an error in the processing itself. It's like a bug in our mental operating system, often tied to things like memory and attention. This brings us to where that bug usually shows up. According to something called dual process theory, our brain has 2 basic operating modes. There's System 2, which is our slow, deliberate, analytical mind, but we only spend about 5% of our time there. The other 95% of the time, we're running on System 1. Fast, automatic, intuitive. It's our gut reaction. And it's right there, in System 1, where cognitive biases love to hang out. Okay, now that we kind of get the mechanics, let's meet some of the actual culprits you'll face as a PA. You can think of this as a rogues gallery, a lineup of the cognitive biases most likely to trip you up out in the clinic. We're going to focus on 3 of the big ones. First up, we've got anchoring bias. That's when you get stuck on the very first piece of information you hear. Then there's availability bias, where a recent case makes you think a certain diagnosis is way more common than it actually is. And finally, the big one, confirmation bias. This is our tendency to only look for clues that prove our first hunch was right. So let's see anchoring in action. Picture this. A medical assistant tells you, hey, the patient in room 3 seems really depressed. You walk in, see they're fatigued, and bam, your brain anchors on depression. You start asking questions about their mood, but you completely forget to ask about things like skin or hair changes, missing the signs of hypothyroidism. That one initial label biased your entire workup. All right, here's availability bias. It's a crazy busy day in urgent care. You've just diagnosed 3 patients in a row with gastritis. A 4th person comes in with abdominal pain. Your brain, totally primed by those last 3 cases, immediately jumps to gastritis again because it's so easily available in your mind. But this time, it's appendicitis. The common diagnosis completely masked the more serious. This quote, wow, it perfectly captures the danger of confirmation bias. Once you have a theory in your head, a diagnosis you think is correct, this bias makes you subconsciously torture the facts to make them fit. You might order tests that you know will confirm it, and then explain away any results that contradict it. It's the difference between seeking proof and seeking the truth. Now, this is where things get really, really important for your work in evidence-based medicine. See, these biases don't just mess with your decisions at the bedside. They can actually poison the well of evidence that you rely on to make those decisions in the first place. I mean, guess what? Researchers are just people with the same cognitive machinery as the rest of us. Their own biases can totally influence how they design a study, how they collect the data, and how they interpret the results. And get this, it's not just a human problem anymore. Recent studies are showing that even AI and large language models can replicate human-like biases like confirmation and anchoring. So how does evidence-based medicine fight back against this? Well, it uses specific study designs as its secret weapons, and the double-blind study is considered the gold standard for a very, very good reason. It's specifically built to counteract our human biases. Here's the magic behind it. By blinding the researchers, which just means they don't know who's getting the real treatment and who's getting a placebo, you basically tie the hands of their biases. They can't unconsciously influence the results to fit what they're hoping for, that's observer bias, and they can't selectively look for outcomes that support their theory, that's confirmation bias. It's a structural defense against our faulty human thinking. Okay, we've identified the problem and its roots. Now for the most important part, what can you actually do about it? This section is your toolkit, actionable strategies you can start using on day one of your clinical rotations. The foundational skill is something called metacognition. I know, it sounds like a fancy, complicated word, but it's really, really simple. It's just the act of thinking about your own thinking. It's hitting the pause button on that automatic System 1 process and asking yourself, wait a second, why do I think this? What shortcuts might my brain be taking right now? Here is a simple 3-step framework you can use anytime. First, just reflect. Pause and ask yourself, could a bias be at play here? Am I tired? Did someone else suggest this diagnosis to me? Second, force a System 2 override. Intentionally slow yourself down and reject that gut reaction. And third, actively consider alternatives. Don't just look for stuff that confirms your hunch. Play devil's advocate with yourself. Purposefully search for evidence that could prove you're wrong. And this all brings us to the most important takeaway of all. Please, please hear this. Recognizing that you have cognitive biases is not a sign of weakness. It's not a flaw. It is a core professional skill for any clinician who truly cares about patient safety. The provider who says, "Oh, I don't have any biases," is the dangerous one. Awareness is your first and most powerful tool. So I'll leave you with this question to carry with you as you start your careers. Now that you've met the rogues gallery, which bias will you be the most vigilant for in your own thinking? Is it going to be anchoring on that first piece of data? Is it the availability of a case you just saw? Or that powerful, seductive pull of confirming what you already believe? Your ability to even ask that question is the first step toward becoming a safer and a much more effective clinician.